Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to transform some pretty complex medical data into a clear, visual journey to solve the startling mystery of nocturnal asthma. If you, or maybe someone you love, battles asthma, you already know the drill. You've probably noticed that the symptoms don't just magically clock out when the sun goes down. In fact, for a lot of people, that is exactly when the real battle begins. Today, we're pulling together clinical guidelines, recent medical research, and expert insights to figure out exactly why this happens, and more importantly, what we can do about it.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with the midnight asthma mystery, dive into your body's internal clock, and then explore something called the melatonin paradox. After that, we'll uncover the nighttime accomplices, see how doctors actually diagnose this problem, and finally, lay out how you can take back the night.
So we begin our investigation by looking at a rather alarming reality regarding your nighttime breathing. Section 1. The Midnight Asthma Mystery, the hidden dangers of the dark. For most of us, sleep is a time for healing and restoration, right? But for those dealing with nocturnal asthma, we really have to ask why our airways suddenly become so incredibly hostile when the lights go out. According to the Allergy and Asthma Network, get this, up to 60% of asthma patients are estimated to have nocturnal asthma. They're waking up coughing, wheezing, and just gasping for breath. It totally disrupts sleep, it wrecks daytime performance, and as we're about to see, the stakes are absolutely massive. I mean, the immediate stakes are literally life and death. Shockingly, over half, 50% of all asthma-related fatalities occur between midnight and 8 a.m. This isn't just a matter of losing a few hours of sleep. It's a critical, systemic vulnerability in how we manage chronic respiratory disease. To stop these nighttime attacks, we have to look inside the body's natural rhythms. To really understand why this happens, we need to investigate the underlying biology of your body's circadian rhythm. Section 2, your body's internal clock, circadian rhythms, and lung function. We all have that internal clock that regulates our bodies over a 24-hour period. Our lungs actually work their best during the day, peaking around 4 in the afternoon. Now, while healthy lungs do take a tiny dip at night, usually less than a 10% fluctuation, people with asthma can experience a staggering 50% drop in airway capacity, and this usually hits its absolute rock-bottom lowest point right around 4 a.m. There is this fascinating hormonal tug-of-war happening while you sleep. During the day, higher levels of adrenaline and cortisol naturally relax your airways and keep them wide open. But at night, your cortisol and adrenaline just drop off. At the exact same time, your vagal tone, which refers to signals from the nerve that controls your resting state, increases right alongside your melatonin levels. This specific nighttime chemical cocktail basically acts as a signal that promotes airway constriction and inflammation. Which brings us to a really fascinating, honestly, kind of counterintuitive discovery about a very popular supplement. Section 3, the melatonin paradox, the sleep aid that triggers asthma. You know, most people think of melatonin as a totally harmless sleep aid, right? Just a natural supplement to cure insomnia or help with jet lag. But here's the paradox. It actually acts as a pro-inflammatory trigger that worsens lung function in asthmatics. Pulmonologists at National Jewish Medical and Research Center discover that melatonin induces the release of chemicals that directly promote inflammation, which is, of course, a hallmark symptom of asthma. The findings here are just huge. Patients with nocturnal asthma experience a severe 18.8% plunge in lung function, and that is directly tied to their peak melatonin levels. In the study, they actually took blood samples and lung function tests from sleeping patients. While healthy controls saw a tiny 1.5% increase in lung function overnight, the nocturnal asthmatics saw this severe drop. The researchers basically concluded that anyone with asthma should be incredibly cautious about taking melatonin supplements because you're just further raising blood levels of this inflammatory trigger. But your hormones aren't acting alone in this. Nocturnal asthma actually has two major comorbidities that act as internal accomplices while you sleep. Section 4, the nighttime accomplices, how GERD and sleep apnea team up with asthma. It turns out gastroesophageal reflux disease, good old GERD or acid reflux, and obstructive sleep apnea frequently coexist with asthma, creating this vicious cycle of nighttime airway obstruction. In fact, it's estimated that up to 80% of people with asthma have some degree of acid reflux. Let's look a bit closer at how this internal trap actually springs shut the second you lie down. So here is the science of the GERD cascade. It's really all about gravity.
Simply lying flat removes gravity from the equation, allowing stomach acid to travel up. Now, here is the wild part. The acid doesn't even need to reach your lungs to cause an asthma attack. When acid just touches the lower esophagus, it stimulates those vagal nerves we talked about. This triggers a reflex that sends signals to tightly constrict your bronchial tubes. Plus, tiny droplets of acid can also sneak or microaspirate into the upper airways, directly causing even more inflammation.
And it doesn't stop there. Having asthma significantly increases your risk of developing its other accomplice, obstructive sleep apnea. This turns chronic airway inflammation into a literal structural sleep barrier. Research shows that over a 4-year period, 27% of people with asthma develop sleep apnea, compared to just 16% of people without it. Also, the chronic use of oral steroids to treat asthma might increase upper airway fatty tissue, which just pushes that sleep apnea risk even higher.
Okay, now that we've identified the biological culprits, let's pivot to some hope and see how clinical experts definitively diagnose this overlapping puzzle. Section 5, Diagnosing the Problem, Clinical Guidelines and Objective Metrics. To establish some deep clinical authority here, we're looking directly at the 2025 Global Initiative for Asthma, or GINA, guidelines. Fun fact for you: in primary care settings, a surprising 25 to 35% of patients with an asthma diagnosis may not actually have it. So, clinical experts demand objective tests to confirm variable expiratory airflow before they officially lock in that diagnosis. GINA experts emphasize tracking really specific variations in your forced expiratory volume and your peak expiratory flow to confirm that excessive airway variability between day and night. FEV1 is basically how much air you can forcefully exhale in exactly 1 second. If that metric jumps by 12% and 200 milliliters after using a bronchodilator inhaler, that's a really strong indicator. Also, using a peak flow meter at home to show an average daily variability greater than 10% in adults, so measuring morning versus evening, flags nocturnal asthma loud and clear.
Finally, let's move to our resolution and lay out the practical, everyday steps you can take to dismantle this nighttime trap. Section 6, Taking Back the Night, Actionable Solutions for Better Sleep.
From elevating your bed to combat that GERD cascade, to avoiding melatonin, these targeted steps can seriously help you reclaim your rest. Elevating the head of your bed by just 6 to 8 inches uses gravity to keep that acid down where it belongs. Stopping eating a few hours early prevents the acid from building up in the first place. And remember that melatonin paradox? Yeah, definitely reconsider those supplements. You also need to control your bedroom environment. Wash your bedding in hot water weekly and use allergy-proof coverings to defeat dust mites. But absolutely the most important step, take your daily controller medications like inhaled corticosteroids to suppress airway inflammation around the clock. So, considering the accomplices and the biological clocks we've just exposed, what hidden triggers might be affecting your own airway health tonight? Is it a silent reflux issue, a perfectly natural drop in cortisol, or perhaps it's that innocent-looking melatonin pill sitting on your nightstand? Understanding the actual science of nocturnal asthma shifts the power right back to you. I really hope this explainer has illuminated the dark corners of nighttime asthma so you can take action and finally get a good night's sleep. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and keep asking the right questions about your health.